few months ago I wrote this blog post called Broken Meritocracy. In there I was trying to create a very simple framework on how to spot what I consider are fundamental flaws in most of governance systems. And also I was suggesting how this could be improved by using smart contracts and blockchain. Since then I've been involved in a lot of conversations with a lot of people from the Ethereum community, and I realized that I'm doing a horrible job explaining it. This is a new attempt to communicate these ideas, hopefully making them simpler and less abstract, so they're easier to understand. The framework I was suggesting is based on two fundamental assumptions. The first one is that the goal of governance is to make the best decision possible, whatever these governance care about. I forget to mention why I believe this is so important, and it may not seem obvious, but in most governances, their primary goal is not to have the best decisions, but to have specific entities participating in the system, whether it's because they want control or because the system needs to be fair. Like in the case of nation state, we want to have everyone represented. The second one is the chances to get to these decisions will be maximized when the entities better qualified to take these decisions are the ones participating in the governance process. So if you have an ice cream shop, best entities will be ice cream experts. It's as simple as that. With these two assumptions, it seems kind of obvious that the key element to have a governance that can be successful is to define who or who cannot vote. I was suggesting to use meritocracy as a framework to think about it. If you take any governance, you can think about it as a subset of a meritocracy, right? In any governance, there is this idea of merit. And this will be just a set of features that an entity needs to have in order to participate. For example, in a nation-state elections, in order to vote, you need to be overage, have a citizen ID card, and maybe not have committed any crime. Or in a company board, in order to make decisions, you need to own shares of the company, right? In this case, also, the more shares you have, the more important your vote is, right? Then, what are the key elements to have a merit that actually works? I tried to summarize that within like 3 key elements, although probably it can be encapsulated just within the first one, but I think that way makes things more obvious. So the first element is the merit needs to define what is valuable to the system. It needs to be aligned with the system values, and that's very hard to do. Probably the most obvious example for that is the nation state. Actually, in the nation state there is another problem, which is what are the system values? It's what the Constitution say: comfort, happiness, security. Ask two people what's happiness and you'll get two different responses. So we will never agree on that. Probably that's because it's a non-voluntary system. But that aside, the definition of merit in the nation-state elections is too wide. It's not well defined enough. We mentioned like you need to be overage, and that probably is trying to say have lived enough experiences and you have enough mental capacities to make good decisions. They ask you to be a citizen, that makes sense, because if you're from a different country, you want something bad for us, so if you haven't committed any crime, that's trying to represent that you're a good person and you care about others, right? This is better than nothing, but it's still super wide definition. And the problem with that is that there is absolutely no requirements here for, to force people to inform or to understand how things work in order to vote. And the consequence of that is the populist governments all over the world winning more and more elections every year. In the case of a company, it's much easier to define what merit should care about because the goals of the system are much more obvious. All the companies eventually, the goal is to make profit, but if we're not that evil, let's assume that you have an ice cream shop, then the goal is to make the best ice cream in the world possible. Then it makes defining merit very, very easy. We want people ice cream experts that have good taste for ice cream, that know how to make ice cream machines. Those will be the key elements that your merit should encapsulate. The second key element I was suggesting to have a merit that actually works is that the merit should not be exchangeable. In the case of nation-state elections, this is your ID card. This ensures that you cannot exchange identities, therefore each person one vote. But in the case of companies, for example, to my opinion, this is flawed in the sense that you can buy and sell shares of the company. Basically, the the entities with more economic capacity can always overrule the system. You could extrapolate and say, sure, people that has made money is because it's very smart people and understand the system, therefore are the ones that will make better decisions. But I think that's like an extreme generalization. The reason I decided to include this second key element is because, especially in the last year, we've seen the rise of ICOs and a lot of Ethereum projects. And a lot of them has this some sort of built-in governance, which is driven by some sort of governance token. And in a lot of cases, this token is exchangeable. In the case of companies, maybe the approach until now makes sense because we didn't have other tools. But in the case of Ethereum projects, which most of them are trying to create this global good without real intention for profit, it does not make sense to have a token like that, because basically you're saying that whatever this network or project is suggesting to fix will be eventually ruled by the ones who have more money. The last element that I believe is worth mentioning, it's more like a necessity than a desired feature. And it's the fact that we need to be able to quantify merit. Unless we can quantify these metrics that we will extrapolate to a number, that will be the merit. We just can't operate. In the nation-state elections, this element that we use to quantify how much merit each entity has, it's the ID card. One entity, one ID card. That means that each entity has the same voting weight. In the case of a company, it is the shares. It's very easy. How many shares do you have? You have 50% of the shares, you have 50% of the voting power. The interesting thing here is we don't use these metrics because we believe are the best ones to take decisions, but we use them because are the ones we can quantify. In the example of the ice cream shop, I would like to quantify who is the best ice cream seller in the world. But how do I do that? I need to find metrics that symbolize that, right? There is not such a metric that represents exactly that. In the case of nation-state elections, it has backshot, kind of. We created the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where we say that all humans are equal somehow. And is this idea that everyone is equal what is causing now that all the humans have the same voting power? And it's what is causing this populism. So unless we can find better metrics to quantify the values that we care about, we will be stuck in the system we have. I guess that's the second part of the video that I want to do, which is how we can change that using blockchains and smart contracts and Ethereum and cool stuff.